Hey, my name is Ron, and I'm the pastor here at Vitalpoint Church, and I just want to say thanks for watching and being part of this gathering. We're in a series right now called Practicing the Way, and today we're going to be exploring the topic of prayer. What I love about this series is it's designed in a way to help us develop practices that form our relationship with Jesus Christ, but also partner with God by His Spirit in the formation of Christ-likeness. One of the things that I love about Vitalpoint Church is that we create space for people to explore the Bible, to explore faith in Jesus and church. We love to walk with people as they move towards being fully devoted followers of Jesus. Recently, someone asked me, hey, can you describe Vitalpoint Church to me? And the only thing that can come to my mind is that we're passionately outward focused while deliberate in our discipleship making of Jesus. Now, you won't find that anywhere in our documentation. You're not going to find it on our website or anywhere. It's just something that I've been working on. What it means is basically this, is that we love to reach and to impact people who have not yet encountered Jesus. We want to make sure that we exemplify who Jesus is and that He was for others. He was for people. And so we're excited to be able to be outward focused, create those spaces, but also designed in a way to help you grow in that relationship. That's why we're doing this series called Practicing the Way. Now, if you're unsure of what this means and this idea of practicing the way, we've actually adapted it from a series by a guy named John Mark Comer. He's a church leader in Portland, Oregon. And he talks about what does it mean to be intentional in our patterns and in our rhythms as an apprentice of Jesus. He basically builds it out this way: to be with Jesus, to become like Jesus, and to do what Jesus did. So today, our topic is prayer. We recognize that even saying that word, for many of us, we're kind of like, okay, I've heard the word, I've tried it, but yet it is something very difficult to pattern in our lives. You know, when you look at prayer, you realize that there's a lot of people that have religious practices around prayer. We can go to a mosque or a temple and we can see people deeply committed to prayer. We can walk the halls of a hospital in the cancer unit and see people praying to God for healing of a loved one, for comfort for one. We can think of people who've cried out in desperation to be freed from addiction and pain. Someone might be facing life and death situation. Even the staunch atheist might offer up some sort of prayer to something out there to intervene. A few months ago, you might recall in the NFL, there was a player that had a cardiac arrest on the field. We saw a demonstration of prayer as the fans and players gathered and prayed. Even at one point, an ESPN anchor right on national television, as a believer in Jesus Christ, paused and prayed on national television. It was so powerful and it was so clear. Prayer is also something that each and every one of us, whether we like to admit it or not, we wish we were better at it. I know for myself, when I think about my own prayer life, there are times that I just simply wish that I was better at this whole thing called prayer. So in order to kick this off and to kind of get us in the mindset, I want to start with a phrase this phrase that might be a little bit startling to you. And it's this: some of us need to stop praying because we have the wrong approach. I said this recently on a podcast with David, our site leader from Exeter. We do a weekly wrap-up podcast. If you want to watch that, it's on YouTube. And I said to him, we just need to stop praying. What I mean by that is this: we actually need to stop talking and start listening. See, oftentimes we miss the richness of prayer because we believe that prayer is all about us doing the talking. I want to flip this on its head a little bit today and come at it from a different perspective. I want to come at it from how do we develop an ear for God and through prayer. I want to take you to a section in the Bible that is probably not a section that you would anticipate us to go to in this topic. And I'm going to take you there and we're going to unpack it and see what God does. I'm going to take you to the very first book of the Old Testament, very first book in the Bible, It's Genesis. Moses wrote this book and captured the stories of early humanity. He wrote this to help God's people know who God was and where they came from. We're introduced to ancient culture and customs and times. The section that I want to look at is found in chapter 24. There's this man named Abraham, and he's old and he's dying, and he wants to find a wife for his son Isaac. So he asks one of his high-level servants to go back to the land that Abraham had left to find a wife for his son. Now again, keep in mind, ancient times, ancient context. The servant goes on behalf of Abraham to find Isaac a wife. And it's so fascinating. I want to read it for you in Genesis chapter 24, starting at verse 12. And he said, O Lord, God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show steadfast love to my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Let the young woman to whom I shall say, please let down your jar that I may drink, and who shall say, drink, and I will water your camels. Let her be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. By this I shall know that you have shown steadfast love to my master. This is an incredible moment. The servant of Abraham goes and makes a request before God. This is a common practice for all of us when we think about prayer. We bring our things before God. He laid down his request before God, and he gave a specific certain prayer request and answering it in a certain way. God, show me who it is. See, prayer is about bringing our requests before God, but I believe it is much more than that. The servant's prayer was a posture of this: God, show me what you are about to do. Give me the eyes to see the answer to my request. See, he was partnering with God in that moment in his request of his prayer. He was saying, God, you have already provided. Give me the eyes to see what you are doing in this moment. See, if our idea of prayer is to manipulate God into doing what we want him to do, we will be greatly disappointed. Prayer is the request that reveals the active work of God. Prayer is about giving us the eyes to see what God is already doing. Jesus actually gave this idea in a famous prayer that he gave his disciples in Matthew chapter 6. He says this: your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Prayer is the portal that gives us a front row seat to the unseen reality of what God is doing that aligns with his will being done on earth as it is in heaven. Prayer is asking to participate in what God is doing, not getting him to grant us our 3 wishes or giving him our grocery list and having him say yes to everything that we request of him. It is allowing us to have the right eyes to see God's provision and what God is doing. A number of years ago, I had this man come to me after church, and he wanted me to pray for him. He said, I am being sentenced for a crime that I committed. Can you pray for me? And what he was wanting was a not guilty verdict. But when I stepped into that moment to pray, I prayed that God's plan would be known and that God's grace would be poured out no matter what the outcome was. See, the reason why many people are disillusioned or even angry at God is because they have an expectation of God to answer our prayers according to what we want. Prayer is surrendering my will to the will of God. My requests are made not as demands, but as a desire to see what God is already doing. Let me see, God, what you are about to do. The servant wanted God to show him who it was that he had chosen for Isaac. He had assumed that God's plan was already in play. He wanted to realize who it was, and he stepped into that moment. Give me the eyes to see. Now, there's a transition in this moment that is so beautiful. as he waits for God to answer, he sees this woman approaching the water. And look what he does in verse 17. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, "Please give me a little water to drink from your jar." I love this moment. This is the active side of prayer. He had set his heart towards God, and in that posture, he acted in the moment to see if this was how God was going to answer his prayer. See, oftentimes we take a passive approach to prayer. God, give me that new job, right? But you never really go and look to see if there's any new jobs out there. God, give me a girl or a guy of my dreams, but you never go out to meet anybody. God, help me get out of this financial situation, but you never put a plan in motion to get out of that financial situation. This servant goes to her and she responds by giving him water, and then she legit says, "Let me get water for your camels also." Okay? Now, let me ask you a question. You can look at the person beside you and you can answer it if you want. Do you think that this was a clear indication that God had revealed the plan? Do you think it is? Do you think that God was answering his prayer? We would all say, yes, absolutely. Many of us, 99% of us, would have acted in that moment. But look what the servant does in verse 21. It says, "The man gazed at her in silence to learn whether the Lord had prepared his journey or not." I read this and I'm like, are you kidding me? Are we being serious here? Like, you prayed, God revealed, she did what you thought she would do, and now this is the one that is to go and to marry Isaac. But he takes time. He gazes, he takes it all in. He watches her give drink to the camels, and then he sits in silence to discern and to learn, is this of God? See, just because something lines up doesn't always mean that God is answering our prayers. If we are not taking time to listen, we are often missing the greater work of what God is doing in the moment. Listening prayer is the deepest part of the rich prayer life, where one learns to tune their ear to the voice of God. Do you know that one of the greatest gifts a follower of Jesus gets is a new set of ears? Did you know that? Like, I'm serious about this. When you think about a person that becomes a follower of Jesus, I'm not talking about the man Jesus, I'm talking about the Son of God, the one who died, who bore our sin on a cross, the one who resurrected from the dead. I'm talking about someone who follows that Jesus and has been reconciled to God and has been sealed by the Holy Spirit. You get new ears in that moment, and the ears give us an ability to hear the voice of Jesus. Let me say that again for you, because I don't want you to miss it in case you phased out. Every follower of Jesus has the ability to hear the voice of Jesus because we get new ears. Deep, rich prayer is the maturing process of learning to tune our ears to his voice. Jesus gave this illustration, the most beautiful illustration about this, in John chapter 10. It's a New Testament book, John. Shepherds were common in Jesus' day, so it makes sense that he used this as an illustration. He uses an illustration of a shepherd and sheep, and how the sheep know the shepherd's voice. The sheep would be in a sheepfold with all the other sheep, and a shepherd could go and they could call out their sheep, and their sheep would follow the voice of their shepherd. In John chapter 10, verse 4, he says, "When he has brought out his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice." Now, I'm not a sheep farmer. I mean, I grew up a good chunk of my life in New Brunswick. I've worked in farms and barns and stuff like that, milking cows and all that, but never sheep. But we're in good fortune here because we have sheep farmers that are part of our church. I reached out to them and I said, so listen, that whole sheep thing and shepherd's voice, is it a real thing? And I got an instant response. Oh yeah, it's a real thing. The sheep know the shepherd's voice. I said, okay, but what would happen if I tried to get the sheep to follow me? And they made it very clear. They said, no, the sheep would not recognize your voice. Matter of fact, if I were to go into the barn and begin to talk, the sheep would become nervous and unsettled. Jesus makes it clear. He is the shepherd. We are the sheep. Those who follow him have the ability to hear his voice. We have ears to hear, but we must be willing to train our ears to learn what his voice sounds like. Which means this: sometimes we just gotta stop talking and learn to listen. A few months ago, I had to go pick up our oldest granddaughter, Tatum, and I felt like a chauffeur. I was bringing her down to our place. It was about a 30-minute drive, and we were just driving, having a good time. And I'm telling you, she would not stop talking. And I finally said at one point, Tatum, please stop talking. I wonder if sometimes God looks at us and says, would you please just stop talking, because I want you to listen to what I have to say. This is the journey in the process of learning the voice of Jesus. Now, saying that, some of you are like, okay, that's interesting, but how do I do this? I can listen all I want, but how do I discern the voice of Jesus? Here's what I'm going to present to you. A couple things that's going to help us with this. The first one is this. We hear the voice of Jesus when we spend time with him in the scriptures, in the Bible. Okay? So last week, we talked about faith formation, the practicing the way. We talked about the scriptures. We talked about the reality of Jesus fulfilling the scriptures, in which means when we encounter the scriptures, we encounter Jesus. This means that we learn his voice when we read the Bible. Let me unpack this for you. I'm going to give you a super practical thing to do here, okay? It's going to be really fun. This week, what I want you to do is this. I want you to read Psalm 139 every day this week. Psalm 139 has 24 verses. I have it on the screen for you. I want you to write it down. And what I want you to do is, I want you to read it, and I want you to quietly listen to what Jesus might be saying to you through the reading of the Bible, through the scriptures. What this does is you begin to learn to tune your ear to what he's saying directly to you, what he might highlight, what he might reveal, what he might whisper or nudge inside of you, so that the scriptures are what comes to life in that moment. And here's what happens to me sometimes. This may sound a little strange, but I'm just going to say it, is that oftentimes I discern the voice of Jesus speaking to me through the scriptures. It actually sounds like my voice. It literally sounds like Jesus uses my voice to speak to me, to highlight something. So as you enter into Psalm 139, you're going to read it with a posture of, Jesus, I want you to speak to me. Now, if you get nothing, don't stop doing it, because one day you will hear his voice. And it'll be like someone who gets implants and they hear for the very first time, and you're going to be like, I think I just heard the voice of Jesus. And you'll be able to learn what that means. It's exercising. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to try this right now. And you're like, you're looking around the room going, are we serious? Yeah, we're going to do this right now, okay? So I'm going to put 2 verses up on the screen for you. This is the last 2 verses of the Psalm 139. And what we're going to do is this. I want you to read it twice, and then we're going to sit in silence. So we're going to start it right now. We're just going to do this for 60 seconds. Are you set? I know this is super awkward. We all love silence. Next week, we're going to talk about silence and solitude, so it's going to be interesting. But here we go. We're going to enter in for 60 seconds, read the verse, and sit in silence. All right. Here's the other part of this that I want to help us with. And if you didn't hear anything, that's fine. It's just the learning, it's the beginning, it's the process. Another way that we hear the voice of God is often through other people. This one will be a little bit harder because there's some of us that this is a trigger thing. This is a negative reaction because some of you have been likely hurt by someone who's pulled this off. I don't know if you've ever had this happen to you before, but sometimes you talk to someone and say, well, God told me. And it's like, okay, I appreciate that, but I just don't know what to do with that because sometimes it's a little bit over the top, and sometimes in certain settings, it becomes a super sounding spiritual abusive thing to say, but if it's not done correctly. So let me help us understand this in a healthy way. It has to do with your heart, not theirs, okay? It's more about your heart than the person actually communicating it. There's a New Testament verse that this guy named the Apostle Paul wrote in 1 Thessalonians 5:17. It's not on the screen. It's just this little line. It says, "Pray without ceasing." What this means is that when we are tuned into Jesus' voice on a regular basis, we're posturing our lives in a way to receive the word from others when it's given. So when someone gives you a word, your heart is postured towards Jesus and listening to his voice. It means that your heart is receptive in knowing if this is of God or not. A consistent awareness of Jesus' voice gives you the ears to hear what this person is saying. Let me give you a real-time example of this that was done in a healthy way a few weeks ago in my own life. I was preparing a talk for a Sunday morning here at Vitalpoint Church, and I was preparing a talk about how Jesus was going from town to town and he was healing. And I was really sensing in my time of study and prayer that Jesus was going to start healing again. It wasn't about starting, he's already healing and all this stuff. So I was wrestling with this. I woke up that one morning in that week getting ready for the message, and I had a text from someone in the church, and they said, "Hey, can we talk?" So later that day I called. And we, chit-chat for just a second. Then he jumped in. He says, "Hey, listen, Ron, I don't want to tell you how to run the church. Like, just so you know that pastors love to hear that." I'm kidding. It's not like we don't think about this stuff 24/7. Of course, we know all this. We live in this all the time. So when someone says that, it's kind of like, what's going to happen? But then this happened. This guy said, "Listen, I was praying and God revealed to me that he wants to heal people at Vitalpoint Church." This was the kind of God told me moment. But then he said, and this was important, and the combination of me receiving it and him saying it was this. He said, "But you're going to have to discern if it was God or not. You're going to have to discern if it's for you or not. This is what I received, and you have to discern it and ask a few people to pray about it." What he didn't know was I was preparing a talk on God healing people. Now, what's been fascinating for us as a church is that we've had a number of people healed since Christmas. We had a woman healed in our Christmas service in Exeter. We've had a man healed on Wednesday nights in Alpha. We've had a student healed in our junior high department in Poplar Hill. When we are postured to receive and our ears are tuned to the voice of Jesus, when that moment happens, when that word is given, it settles, it sits in, and you go, yes, I believe that is of God, or it's not. We would say that in our context would be words of knowledge or a prophetic word. It's an affirmation of something that you're walking through, making a decision on. God will use the voice of someone else. They may not understand what they're saying. They may not even be sure if it's landing, but they recognize that it is something they have to give. I can't wait to share the stories at the Vision Builders Gala on March 3rd of how God used people in our lives to affirm where our fourth location is going. It is absolutely stunning. It is a total God thing. See, when we posture our hearts in prayer towards God, and when he begins to speak, we realize that this is for us and it is from him. There are times when we remain silent, we begin to hear and know the voice of God. And even if we don't at times hear it, we claim the promise that he will never leave us nor forsake us. Jesus said that we will know his voice. The key to learning his voice is taking time to listen. Listening is the muscle that we exercise that strengthens so we can know his voice. I mentioned John Mark Comer at the beginning of this talk. And there's something that he said that I find so interesting. He said, prayer is getting to the end of ourselves and the beginning of God. Think about that. In the middle of the night, unable to calm your heart and your mind, God, I need you. When you're in the thick of the battle of sickness, pain, and turmoil, God, I need you. When there are no words to express your gratitude for what God has done in your life, God, give me the words to say. You're at the end of your rope and the bottom is right there. God, I need you. But it's more than that. It's the intimate space where we listen to his voice. As Jesus did many times, he would get up early in the morning before the other disciples. The disciples often didn't even know where he was. He would get up early and he would listen to the voice of his Father, and he would get a directive for the day. See, the amazing thing about understanding prayer is that it's not simply about us talking. It's watching what Jesus did as he learned to listen to the voice of his Father. Prayer is the place from which we end and God begins. It enables us to see the unseen realities of his kingdom happening in this world on a macro sense and in a micro sense in our lives. It's the place where we can live in the confidence of our faith, knowing that God desires to speak to us. The question is, are we willing to stop talking and start listening?